again, when we talk about the Facebook and Google in terms of the amount of digital exhaust that they have on us and how they're able to profile us and segment us as users and then sell that information to people for exploitive reasons.
You're listening to Pardon the Disruption with your host, Tom Young.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Tom Young. Let's go around the room.
Hi, this is Bart Gallo.
This is TJ Young.
And this is Rohan Kapoor.
Hi, guys. Hey, so today we're going to talk about, we had an earlier podcast on the concept of digital exhaust. Mm-hmm. We talked about how digital platforms are creating this tremendous amount of data coming off of systems. And today what we want to talk about is one of the uses of that data that was done by Netflix to create and inform the creation of the hit series House of Cards. Now, as you can imagine, Netflix has a tremendous amount of information about the viewers, what they watch, when they watch, the cross-correlation of the things they like from the rating system. And that rating system has won some awards and challenges on AI in terms of recommending what you should watch. So if you take the time to rate the shows you like, good and bad, it will recommend what you might want to watch next. And I would say it's a very good system. Spotify uses something similar to your playlists. If you have a playlist with 18 songs, it will suggest a 19th and 20th and 21 songs that fit into that genre based on what's happening there. And it's using machine learning and a lot of big data. So today we want to talk, Bart brought this to our attention. We want to talk about how Netflix came to fund House of Cards, which is probably their largest first investment into original content that came out, I think, in 2013, right?
Yeah, it's their first original.
So, Bart, debrief us a little bit about what Netflix did here.
Yeah, sure. So Netflix, obviously, for several years now has been collecting a pretty huge amount of data from their user activity. And at the time that House of Cards was being discussed as a new venture into original content, it was seen as a huge risk, taking on the legacy content creators and the $100 million investment estimated in it to make it happen.
Season one of House of Cards cost $100 million?
No.
I'm not sure if it was season one
the
initial project. I'm not sure how many seasons were. But from the data that they were collecting, they basically had three major insights that they pulled together to create kind of the foundation that justified the investment. And it was, they knew that the British version of the show had a huge audience. They knew that the movie The Social Network, directed by David Fincher and other of David Fincher content, had a huge audience. And they knew that users who watched the British version of the show also watched a lot of Kevin Spacey content. So tying these three elements together, they were able to kind of justify that this huge investment would pay off. And, now we're 6 years later, and they're from one original show to 30, multiple seasons in most of them.
That's something. So I don't think people can appreciate how much big data or digital exhaust that Netflix has. Now, Rohan, you have a clip of one of the engineers at Netflix talking about how much data they have. We're going to play that clip real quick and we get a sense of how much data is out there.
Sure.
From a data standpoint, that is about 600 billion events per day. Our warehouse is about 40 petabytes, give or take. And we're crunching 3 petabytes worth of that information every single day. And then we're writing 300 terabytes of net new information into that warehouse. So the scale is quite large, and we can see all sorts of different behavior of our subscriber base.
We have the graphic up on the screen here so I can read it. So they're creating, they get 600 billion events per day. That's people hitting pause, play, watch this, don't watch that. And they're dumping 300 terabytes of insight. When we talk about doing an analytics on big data, we talk about signal to noise ratio. So you have the signals are the information you get from what's in that data. They're writing about 300 terabytes of new insight around what's happening with their user base every day, which is a tremendous amount of data.
And it goes beyond just whether or not someone likes a show or, rates it poorly. I'm pretty sure they track everything, how you navigate through the app itself, where you pause on screen,
Yep.
Yeah.
where do you go and then go back because you couldn't find something.
Which shows are the most compelling because they're the least paused versus other shows.
How long do you know the little preview, if you hang on the title for too long and then it starts playing the autoplay?
I love that feature.
Hey, I can't stand it.
Really?
Yeah. Like how long do you stay on this one versus the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Does the placement in that order affect how long you stay on that title in terms of the autoplay? There's all these variations, which I think is why 600 billion events a day. It's such a large number.
Yeah.
And so it's even more impressive that the company with this much data has been able to surface some incredibly actionable insights with the House of Card reference that we've kind of talking about today. They've gone through all of that data and they've managed to surface the specific insight that's led to an actionable outcome. And it's incredible the success that you can have when you do capture that digital exhaust. I think we saw some numbers in another video which talked about House of Cards brought in an additional 3 million new members. Bear in mind it was early on in Netflix's journey, 2013, that it came out. That's an incredible success from going through so much data.
Well, think about the producers and the studio executives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the decisions to cast certain people, especially the lead, is really up to the creatives now. Right? It's up to the director. It's up to those leading casting, even collaborating with the writer itself to say who are we envisioning in this work. And I think at some point, depending on how successful this becomes and in other variations of this, I think if you're a studio and you want to lower your risk, you're going to say, hey, I mean, I know you want Kevin Spacey or hey, you want Matt Damon for something, but we need to run a similar test to make sure that this particular combination in your target audience will mesh well.
Right. And it goes one step beyond that too. It's exactly what you're talking about. And then it's also looking at post-production. Hey, if we're going to put up certain artwork and certain imagery, we actually know what kind of marketing, what kind of imagery you need to use in order to attract a certain type of user. And therefore you can create your post kind of movie digital assets in a specific way to really engage users on the
You mean the in content or like the in video content or like the way that the poster is shown?
The way that the poster's shown,
Okay, yeah.
to try and use data to inform those decision making. Decision making.
This really gets to the notion again when we talk about digital deployments. We think of the paradigm of value in 3 waves. The first wave is digital does things better, faster, cheaper. The second wave is taking the consequentials from that deployment, and that's what Netflix has done here. They've taken the digital exhaust and they've exploited that digital exhaust to inform their decision making. And now you get into the third wave, which is reimagining your new business, which is to create it. I don't believe that they took this to the next level, which is to actually use it to inform to write the dialogue and scene settings and things like that. And maybe that's where it's going.
That's what I was curious about. That's what I thought you were referencing, Rohan, around maybe you start, because that's very advanced what you just brought up, and it's very expensive, at least today. But if there's certain elements in the background of a scene, you can imagine, the poster in the room, in the foreground or the background behind 2 people talking, if that poster is software definable, then you could change the content in the back of a scene in a way that's maybe cost effective so that if you release the movie in one market, or at least use it as a way to test, to say, hey, we're going to have different variations of what's in the scene that could be a green screen or something, just to see what works the best, what's the most compelling.
Yeah. I think also, so we talk about, Tom's got a book coming out in spring around digital labor. And there's an amazing example, which everyone knows, around Blockbuster being disrupted and Netflix coming in and kind of changing, effectively putting them into bankruptcy. When you look at the Blockbuster model of people, they had a large number of people working there.
65,000.
65,000 people at Blockbuster, right? Doing some, a lot of them just staffing the physical locations they had. You look at Netflix and the example of Netflix has I don't know what the number of employees, a fraction of what they have. But what those people are focusing on is this, right? And that's incredible. They're using far fewer employees to focus on strategic, analytical.
Yeah, you're getting to a
things.
different point, which is the notion that the new jobs that get created from this are not a subset of the old jobs.
Yeah.
There are less jobs. So new jobs get destroyed. That's the Blockbuster example, and then jobs get created. And the jobs that get created are typically lower in number, higher in skill level, but they're not a subset. It's a completely different thing. So we talk about a machine that, there's a machine that The Economist wrote about. This is about 6 or 7 years ago. It went into the fields and picked lettuce. So the machine replaced migrant workers who were picking lettuce, but you had to hire engineers and mechanics and maintenance people to program the machine. So it was a very different skill set.
Yeah.
So it employed less people on a farm, and it had a better effect. One of the things we want to talk about, though, is back to the theme of this show, which is the use of digital exhaust to create new business opportunities. This really is in the core of the second wave of value in our business model. We talk about wave 1, better, faster, cheaper. Wave 2, consequential benefits, exploiting this digital exhaust. And then 3, reimagining their business model. So I want to use another example you guys are all familiar with, because I think we all took a trip, a recent trip about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to Disney World, where they use the RFID wristbands. So they went away from the ticket system, where you go into the system and then you walk into the park, and they know how many people are in the park, but didn't know what they were doing so much. They'd wait in line, they'd go on different rides. And now they have the RFID reader, and now it's tied into the smartphone, and they capture all kinds of data. So I'd worked at Disney for a while in their IT group as a consultant, and so I met with one of the VPs in their IT infrastructure who was deploying the RFID system at Disney World, and I met with him right after they deployed it. And we talked about, they went from, in this case, we were talking about 600 billion events per day, because I think Netflix is literally capturing everything. But back then, when they deployed it at Disney World, they went from, I'm going to get the numbers slightly wrong, but from 2 million transactions a day in all the theme parks to 200 million. So went a 100-fold. Now, I suppose if you captured everything in the way Netflix is doing in terms of all the clicks and everything, Disney is probably just scratching the surface about how they could start to look at that. But the issue gets to the notion of how it informs your business decisions. So Netflix makes a decision to do House of Cards. They spent a lot of money on it, but it was informed by data. And they had a pretty good understanding that they were going to get a return on that. Well, Disney has the same thing, understanding, do I invest $100 million or $50 million on a new ride attraction? How do I justify that based on park attendance and driving a revenue model for the theme park? So it's very similar. And you can go through that with different business models, whether it be a restaurant. Do I redecorate? I mean, start using digital exhaust to inform your business decisions to make better decisions. Because right now, those kind of decisions are left with typically the owners of capital or executives to make let's call it a gut decision, maybe a decision that's informed by experience or by their own personal bias. And now we move to one that's data-driven. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And Disney obviously have their streaming coming out as well. It'll be interesting to see how they can connect the data points offline with some of the data that they are able to gather through that service as well.
Well, again, when we talk about the Facebook and Google in terms of the amount of digital exhaust that they have on us, and how they're able to profile us and segment us as users, and then sell that information to people for exploitive reasons. I think at some level, because that's their business model, it's a perverse incentive, and I think we talked about that a little bit in our prior podcast. But let's think about this in a positive sense. Let's think about how we use this, because I'll go back. I thought House of Cards was a game changer for Netflix.
It was.
Yeah.
For their original content.
Yeah.
It was their first original show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic show. I mean, when they came out with season 2, season 1 followed the same format where they released an episode every week or something like that. When season 2 came out, it came out on Valentine's Day of 2014, if I got my dates right. And it clogged the internet because it was the first time binge watching was really started, because all the episodes were released simultaneously, so you could watch them out of order if you wanted to, and that ruined Valentine's Day that weekend, because people were just basically binge watching the show because it was such a good show.
Well, Netflix is already a big percentage of total internet traffic, right?
Yeah, I think it's up on the slide we were showing before. It's 33% or 37% at the
Of
time.
worldwide internet traffic?
U.S.
Of US.
North
Yeah.
America, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, the US is also a pretty large portion of worldwide anyway.
Right.
So it's tremendous, and it changed the whole business model, but it's driving a change in nature. So it was a game changer for them, and now it's informing. And again, at some level, you have to argue. We get into the third wave, and I don't think they're quite yet there at the third wave, where we're going to have the digital exhaust in conjunction with smart AI write scripts and say, you need to have this combination of content to attract this group of users, and the plot needs to look like this and have these elements in it.
Well, they
Bandersnatch was a foray into that, right? Because now they're collecting data on users, what kind of plots certain users are picking, and that could be potentially used.
Yeah.
Sorry, TJ, I cut you
No, I
off.
was just going to say that to go to that third wave, I mean, that's way out there, but this foundation we're talking about is access to this volume of data. I mean, it's a huge amount of data.
Yeah.
I remember watching, and it was I think a TED Radio Hour podcast around Facebook and some of its tests that it would do on its users to see how does engagement change if they change the UI, if they change the way the buttons were pressed, just change the way your newsfeed was constructed. And I remember they had a couple statisticians talking, and they were laughing because like the sample size they work with, the sample size like, oh, n equals 1,000 for the study, we're going to draw up a conclusion, and then we're going to fund some huge project. The sample size they work with is in the hundreds of thousands, in the millions, because of their user base, and not just the user base, but the number of interactions and data points per user. So it's huge. So they can run very, very well thought out, tight hypotheses. And it's not just a sample size of 1,000 people. It's a different level of hypothesis testing, which is why they're so successful, because they're not making such a big leap of faith after the end of the test.
It completely changes the risk profile of potential exciting projects they want to go out and do.
Right, they let the machines do it.
Right.
Put the test out, and then we'll act on what the test says.
Right. Then they're just doing what is the right answer to that initiative rather than having to do all this analytical guesswork up
If you're
front.
worried about your own skin, I mean, you can always point to that, and you're safe to go. Then you're more willing to take risks and continue to innovate as a digital company.
Right.
So again, we want to, in this show, attune people to the fact that this is going to the next level of sophistication. People understood digital exhaust. They get the concept, and they say, okay, targeted advertising, or on Amazon, they're recommending me the next product I should buy based on what I just bought. But this was one that it was eye-opening to me, that they would have used big data to make such a interesting show, because it's not like, you think of the way shows get written. Someone writes a script, it gets shopped in Hollywood or shopped in the studios, and they okay, we're going to greenlight this. Then they go look for actors, and they send the script to the actors, and the actors audition for these parts. This was one where the show was designed around an actor, and designed with a director in mind, and then they wrote the show underneath it to tie back to the British series. Because I watched the original House of Cards that came out on BBC. And it was basically a multi-year miniseries. The first one came out, and then the next one came out several years later, and then the third one came out maybe 3 years after that. So it didn't happen right away. It's sort of an experiment in long-form genres that BBC did. And it was excellent. It was very good. But then the American version came out, and I thought it was a much higher production quality, and it was Americanized. And it couldn't get gotten higher ratings the first couple of years. I think the last season they did, season 6 or whatever, when they lost Kevin Spacey after his problems, I think it dropped off quite a bit in terms of its popularity. I didn't like the last season. But it was they're using now this data, and it's in very interesting ways.
Well, there's interesting social consequences, I wanted to explore this real quick. As the cost to produce these shows come down and the analytics gets better in terms of what we're going to produce next, I think they're going to be even more targeted and disparate in terms of what they go and produce. So it's not going to be everyone's watching the same 3 shows. They're going to keep getting more minute, almost to the point where you and maybe 100 other people are in a certain category in their data science platform, and they're going to create a show for you, or maybe a show that overlaps with you and maybe 4 other groups.
Maybe other users can't even see it.
And they can't even see it.
They looked for it.
I think that trend, combined with the trend of lower cost to produce and lower time to produce, along with the whole switch that we just did in terms of not shows airing every Sunday night, but the entire season being released or a movie being released every time I check Netflix. I mean, every time I check, there's some new production I feel like I just checked the day before, and there's a whole new movie with A-list actors in it. You can't keep up. There's just such a plethora of content, and because it's all released immediately and it's so targeted and minute and just niche content,
Right.
I had a friend comment this to me. He feels like there's less of a community aspect of watching content now. It's much more personalized and individualized.
So it's a balkanization of our collective culture that was tied around media.
Right.
So like I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, there was a couple popular shows, and because there was only a few networks out there. So like I remember the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family was on the same night, and everybody watched it.
Right.
I mean, and it became a thing that people talked about at work, at school. Oh, we're going to go home and watch the Brady Bunch or whatever it would be. The Love Boat was another big one that was popular on NBC, I think. And we lose that cultural cohesion because of the balkanization. If I can create content for very small niche groups, one group may see a whole set of content that and another group sees a different, and there's nothing that binds us together. We get a further balkanization.
Yeah. What do you guys think of the new Castlevania?
I don't even know what that is.
I was wondering what that T-shirt was,
Netflix
Bart.
anime.
I thought it was
That
a
was made
breakfast
just for
cereal.
you, Bart. You're like a sample size of 1. This worked. Everything we throw at him, he likes.
I haven't watched it, but it is critically acclaimed in terms of animated content.
If
By you.
I would have,
I didn't even have to watch it.
I would have guessed that was a breakfast cereal, but it shows. I consume quite a bit of the Netflix stuff. I like what's out there. I think they do some good stuff. I think Amazon's putting out some interesting stuff. They're not as good as Netflix in terms of content, but they're getting there. Apple's going to come in with a lot of money. Google's going to start putting some money in here, and you're going to start to see interesting things. So the issue is, we're going to start to see a lot more good content using this digital exhaust. I think the content we're going to see is going to be more appealing to us, especially the ones that match our profiles. The issue is the unintended consequences of having too much good content out there. Everything from the paradox of choice to the isolation that it has by the fact that you end up binge watching by yourself too much stuff and it's antisocial, to then not having commonality with our friends and family and coworkers around the things that we see and watch. So it's not all good. It's not all bad. It just is. And we're trying to expose people to this so they can have conversation about it, so they can take control over how they look at it. And think about we want to think about this in the most positive sense. How can we use digital exhaust to create more positive outcomes for people so that we don't have malinvestment, that we have good investment, and we improve the quality of people's lives? Anybody have any parting comments on that?
No.
Good.
I notice when someone else is using my account on Netflix because all my stuff gets all mangled, so I know they're changing stuff in real time.
Yeah.
So it's very, very reactive.
You'll be watching Castlevania soon.
Get off my account, man.
Please, if anyone has access to my account, don't go into my stuff and watch
Castlevania.
Fuller House or
It's all
Friends.
You've seen Young Sheldon, though, right?
No,
that's part of the
please.
culture that still exists.
I'm an old curmudgeon.
Young Sheldon has his moment on the Super Bowl. Did
Really?
you see that?
He did.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't watch the Super Bowl.
Oh god.
that wasn't part of Bart's
There's
recommendations.
niche content now. You
Yeah,
have to
that's
watch
true.
what 60 million people are watching.
Talking to the wrong audience.
All right, guys. Well, thanks very much.
All right.
It's a good show. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the show today. Pardon the disruption. If you enjoyed our discussion, I'd invite you to head over to our homepage at www.rumjog.com. You can go there and check out our perspectives page and hear more podcast episodes, read some articles. It's some pretty interesting stuff. You can get access also to our Digital Disruption series. This is a meetup that we do mostly in New York and New Jersey area, where we discuss the impact of these technologies on our society and the way we live and work. We do this alongside of industry experts in various fields like crowdsourcing, automation, and blockchain, the technologies that are disrupting our world today. Anyway, if you like that, you can also follow us on social media at Twitter on the handle @Rumjog. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.